Brian, I got to
What's
do
that?
it. I got to do it.
No,
I
don't.
don't think you do.
Don't.
You know what we're doing.
No.
You know
We
what
talked
we're
about
talking
this.
I've got to. We can't talk about this without me doing it.
There's a couple of
I
reasons
think-
why you shouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm doing it, and it's going to be
Saturday.
great.
It's one
I've
out of three.
waited. I've waited
It's
all
not-
my
it's
life.
not live.
We're not New York.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night! Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show where I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. I'm actually Matt Rodenberg.
I'm Brian.
I'm Alex.
And we are talking about one of the most influential TV shows of all time. I know this is a new series we're doing where we're talking about what is the most influential TV show of all time, but really we can't narrow it down to one. So we're going to do a series for a little while of different ones of these. And we'll have these sort of episodes come and go. But I thought, because this episode should be dropping around October 11th, which is going to be the 49-year anniversary of the first SNL episode. It's also the day that this new movie is coming out called Saturday Night. And, you know, if we were caring about subscriptions and we also had the poll and we had the capacity to do advertisements, this would have been a perfect opportunity to have that movie sponsor this episode. But
you would have been rich, man.
It would have been great, man. So we are going to be talking about why was Saturday Night Live, why is it as influential as it is, what was so great about it. We're going to do a deep dive. Guys, we're going deep. So strap on your scuba gear, lather up your land sharks, and jump into this episode. All right, that's it. That's all I got for preamble.
It's interesting. One thing I thought was interesting is like when the show started, they made a point to have it be people who were at the time very like unknown people. These weren't the big names of the time. You think, oh yeah, like Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, Gene Curtin, like these are big names because of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And for the most part, they stuck to that formula. Every now and then, they strayed away from that, and we'll talk about actually one season in particular that they really strayed away from that.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. These were nobodies, and sure they had some clout because we'll jump into that here because they did borrow from something else that I want to talk about for a little while. But let's just do a really quick early history. A lot of you guys, if you're clicking on this episode, you know what Saturday Night Live is. Even if you've never watched an episode, you know what Saturday Night Live is. You can't live on this planet without knowing in some capacity what Saturday Night Live is. And so it got its start in the middle of the 70s, but I'm going a little further back from that. Starting in 1965, NBC, they would air Late Night with Johnny Carson, and they would air on the weekends reruns for Johnny Carson. And so they did that until about 1974. And at one point then in 74, Johnny Carson petitioned NBC and was like, guys, I need to take breaks. Can we make it so that you don't play these reruns on the weekend? Play them during the week so I can actually get some times where I take a break. And so he had enough clout because it's freaking Johnny Carson. Mm-hmm. And they're like, all right, we're going to do this, but we need something to fill its spot. So Dick Ebersol, who was the VP of late night programming at the time for NBC, he went to this young up-and-comer named Lorne Michaels, and he partnered with them. He said, we need to figure out what we're going to fill this spot with. And Lorne had this great idea for a variety show, sketch comedy, not a variety show, that's probably a mischaracterization, but a sketch comedy show with irreverent adult humor, pushing the envelope to air live on Saturday nights. And that's where the birth of Saturday Night Live came from, October 11th, 1975.
Man, we don't have to see the movie anymore. We just got the whole thing right there, the whole rundown.
That's it. That's the first.
We just lost all the funding.
You must have watched one of the same YouTube videos that I did, because I swear, like they said word for word what you just said.
No, actually, I did not. I didn't watch any YouTube videos about this. I don't think I watched anything. I really kind of wanted to watch some sketches, and I didn't get around to it. But I'm like that old school classic, like let me read with boring words and let me figure it out that way.
You went to the library and you got a book on the history of SNL?
I did. I blew off the dust. And it just flew everywhere.
Well, I spend half my day in the car driving around the cities and back and forth, so it's easy for me to load up a YouTube playlist and hit play while I'm driving.
Perfectly acceptable. You got your information your way, I got it my way.
Well,
so Lorne Michaels, he wasn't a stranger to like this kind of show, because like he was a writer on Laugh-In, and which was a similar concept idea to SNL, just very different though still. And then he also was writing for Phyllis Diller's show, and so she was also a bit of a sketch comedy, had her own like thing going on. So he brought what he learned from those into Saturday Night Live. But like you said, Brian, they used this young, unheard of cast. And so you want to talk a little bit about the cast of that time frame?
Well, I think the biggest name, I mean, they even said the first big star that came out of it was Chevy Chase. And you hear there's so many videos right now about him being hard to work with and pissing people off all the time. But but everyone still can't deny that he was the first one that was really recognizable. And they were talking about that there was a season or for a while where he hurt himself doing one of his pratfalls, and he actually was off, like he had to be missing a few episodes. And the audience was noticing, like, why isn't Chevy Chase there? Like, that's the level of stardom he had. He also had the moniker he got to say, like, I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. Like, that's so well known even 50 years later that you said that in your intro, Matt.
Yeah.
Did he have any fame before being on that? Was he the only one that had a little bit of like experience?
So there's actually a good amount of these guys that I wanted to talk about. Another company that was closely related, but really was more like rivals with SNL. And that was National Lampoons. So if that name's familiar, you've seen National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Animal House, National Lampoon's Caddyshack. So they were originally a magazine, like Mad Magazine, and like that sort of irreverent humor. And they really like pushed the bar in their satire and their commentary. And it was some absurdist, off the wall satire farce sort of, like, I think it was the first issue, but there was an issue where the front cover was a gun held against the head of a dog. And it said, buy this issue or we'll shoot this dog. Like, that's the style of humor that they had. You want to know what's funny about National Lampoons? When they're trying to get this magazine made, they went to all these magazine companies. You know who was their primary backer, who finally was like, yeah, we'll go ahead and support you? Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers had a magazine, and they're like, sure, we'll branch out. We'll get into this National Lampoons market for whatever freaking reason.
I didn't know Weight Watchers was that old. I thought that was a trend that came in the 90s.
Nope. You're thinking of Slim Fast? No, Weight Watchers have been around for quite a while.
And yet we still have fat people.
Didn't work.
Come on. We've been watching Weight all these years. It's done nothing. All right, so National Lampoons, they actually had a radio show for a couple years, like 76 to 77. And I think those are the years. But that had like John Belushi. It had Gilda Radner. It had Bill Murray. And, of course, Chevy Chase. And so the main guy behind it, Doug Kenny, he was I've told stories about Doug Kenny before. He's the guy who saw Airplane and got so depressed because it was as funny as it was. He's like, I will never create something this funny. And he was a guy that actually killed himself. And the last person to see him alive was Chevy Chase on a drug bender. So, like, that's the mental capacity we're dealing with of this guy leading National Lampoons. Hated Lorne Michaels, and Lorne Michaels hated him. So when National Lampoon's Radio Hour got canceled and Lorne swept in and was like, hey guys, I've got this great opportunity. Why don't you come on over to this new show I'm doing? Like, that was a nail in the coffin. And like, they fought so much. And so then Lorne would be like blocking their attempts to do anything else related with National Lampoons. Like Dan Aykroyd, he's like, you'll be fired if you go accept this role on Animal House, because he was offered the role of D-Day. He's like, I will fire you if you go work on Animal House.
So was John Belushi already off of SNL at that point?
I know that him and Aykroyd left completely, clean break, for the first time together to do Blues Brothers. Okay. I thought that like they were still on there, and that Belushi just must have had that much pull. Like maybe Belushi was the type, because he was pretty aggressive or abrasive, and I think he was the type who's like, I know my limits. I'm not going to mess with John Belushi.
Yeah, and that's probably why Chevy Chase was just on the first season, because then he went to go do all the vacation movies with National Lampoon.
Yeah. Or was like Fletch and Caddyshack first, but he did basically he packed up and moved to LA. And you've heard of those people like leaving successful sitcoms or successful shows and never works out for them. It actually did work out for him. He did have a good career after that.
And we're going to see that pattern continue with a lot of the guys that cast members we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So last real quick, there was an early sketch that I saw that was actually really eerie in hindsight. It was John Belushi like playing an old man version of himself, visiting like the graves of the other cast members, saying like, "How did I outlive everybody?" And he was the first of them to die.
Oh man.
I think I remember that sketch too.
Yeah. That's what you get for tempting fate, John. One thing that you might not know that I just wanted to drop this little tidbit is that for the first year and a half, it was called just Saturday Night because there was a Saturday Night Live already on ABC, and that got canceled in 76. So in 77, NBC bought the rights and they were able to use it from 77 onwards. All right, so like those early years, those first four, like we talked about those guys. One person we didn't mention was Jane Curtin. She's another wonderful. Like we're gonna get into some of the vernacular and some of the like references that they make, but like the "Jane, you ignorant slut" line from Aykroyd, so freaking hilarious, and the use of Michael Scott using it in the stress management episode in The Office is just such a perfect like. Shoehorn, make a way to make this reference fit into what you're doing,
which fits because I mean, with Steve Carell's age, he would have been a kid watching those early years.
Yeah,
even though there's a lot of times like he would make reference and be like, "That was so and so from this," and it's like, "Nope, that's the wrong reference."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like he knew it was from SNL, but missed the guy.
And Jane Curtin and Chevy Chase. I mean, they are the ones who really. I think it started with just Chevy Chase doing Weekend Update, and then Jane Curtin started doing it as well. And that just like kind of pioneered the success of Weekend Update throughout all the years. Because when you think of the really good years of SNL, they always had like staples for Weekend Update, whether it was Jimmy Fallon and Tina Fey, and then Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Norm Macdonald.
Yeah.
I mean, Norm Macdonald's probably my favorite for Weekend Update. But yeah, that's was always one of the most popular skits from SNL was the Weekend Update.
Breaking news: murder is now legal in the state of California.
You know what else I heard is I heard that it's alleged that one of the reasons Norm Macdonald was fired from the show or fired from doing Weekend Update was because in the 90s during the OJ trial, he was making too many OJ jokes, and I guess one of the producers was a friend of OJ Simpson.
Oh, jeez. And I think there's a lot more people that were fired from SNL that we actually know. Like we don't know what terms they left on, if they were fired or left on their own. But I think quite a few people were fired from there.
Yeah. Well, like the first cast, like by the time I think it was the fifth year, Lorne Michaels, he like wanted a hiatus from the show, and they just said, "Okay, well, you're just fired and you're going to be gone." So I didn't know he was gone for about 5 years, from 75 to 80, and the rest of the cast who was gone.
From 80 to 85.
That's 80 to 85. That's correct. Yeah. 80 to 85. Chevy Chase, Aykroyd, and John Belushi were all already gone, but like Bill Murray, Lorraine Newman, Jane Curtin, Gil Rutter, they all quit. They all were offered to stay on, but they basically left in solidarity with Lorne Michaels.
And they struggled to fill that.
They did. Yeah. And that's when they actually hired some people that were known before SNL, isn't that when like Robert Downey Jr. was on there? And I'm blanking. The 80s, I know the 80s is like the forgotten time, early 80s, the forgotten time.
Yeah, because they had Jean Doumanian, I think was her name, running the show, and so there was a lot of negative press for the new people that they got. So they did scramble, and they got their two big names that really saved them from getting canceled, because there's a thought that maybe it was going to get canceled. As in '84, they brought on Martin Short and Billy Crystal. And that was a season that people came back and like, okay, this is hilarious. These guys are fantastic. But the other person that saved it during this era,
I know you're gonna say,
Eddie Murphy.
Yeah. Eddie Murphy like carried that show on his back for a while. It probably would have been canceled though without Eddie Murphy in that time.
Yeah. And like he had some great sketches. I remember his Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood.
That's best. Oh my god.
When you watch the documentary about like Mr. Rogers and like how he was like it hurt his feelings and like he didn't like that parodying and like, oh, you don't feel as good about it. But it was such a hilarious concept to take like the wholesome Mr. Rogers and put it into the ghetto with Mr. Robinson. And
his face when the people would knock on his door, he just like would just go to like a deer in headlights and go, "Ooh, who is it?" This is how we answer the door in my neighborhood.
I love your Eddie Murphy. But no, Eddie Murphy was obviously hilarious and like just launched his career. He jumped off. Eddie Murphy was one of the few, I don't know if he was the only one, but he was one of the few cast members to host the show while he was still a cast member.
Yeah,
because Nick Nolte was supposed to do hosting when they were in 48 Hours together, and then Nick Nolte fell through like last minute, and they asked Eddie Murphy to do it, and so he stepped in. And apparently that rubbed some people the wrong way because like Eddie Murphy was like the golden child during that time, but at the same time, he was the freaking funniest one. There's a reason he was.
Yep.
And like when they came back for that, wasn't you who was telling me, Matt, that when they came back for the big 40-year anniversary special, they didn't really utilize Eddie Murphy that much. He just like introduced a sketch.
Yep.
And was it you that was saying they wanted him to do a Bill Cosby impression and make fun of that whole scandal? And he said, I don't need to be doing that.
Yeah, especially because it was fresh. Like when the 40-year anniversary aired, it was like we had just found out about this like weeks before. It hadn't been a long time. And so he came on the show and he was like, I'll do this introduction. I don't want to do this sketch. And that's where, like I was saying, I really appreciated that Eddie Murphy was like, I don't need to get the laughs to mock something that's so fresh. Like it's not that like Bill, why am I... Cosby. That's it.
Yeah.
I had Clinton in my head. I'm like, it's not Clinton. It's a different C. What's Bill? So it's not like Bill Cosby is like unmockable or anything like that, but it's just like that coming to light and the pain that it obviously caused. I really appreciate that Eddie Murphy is like, okay, we're just going to take a beat here. We're going to let this age a little bit before we jump on the mocking train. So,
yeah. And then like mid 80s, they say that's when we start getting some more recognizable names for like kind of earring into like the next big era of the show, right?
Yeah, some of the big ones like right away in 86 was like Dana Carvey and Phil Hartman, hilarious guys. And like Dana Carvey is one of those guys that I'm surprised his movie career was as bad as it was. But he just picked some pretty crappy projects. But he himself had some really good comedic chops. And like the church lady he did, great character.
Yeah.
And wasn't like John Lovitz and Mike Myers around this time too?
Yeah. And then a couple years after that, it was still in that time, but a couple years after that, we also got Adam Sandler and Chris Farley and David Spade around like 97, 98.
Well, no, it would have been earlier because Chris Farley died in the late 90s. So it would have been like early 90s.
Did he join?
I think he joined like 89 as like a featured player or something, and then he was only on there for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, but then like I think my favorite from that era, even though it's such stupid humor, is you got to be Wayne's World.
Yeah, I mean, they had the movie that came out after that. There's probably another SNL movie before Wayne's World. It was Coneheads before. No, that would have been after.
No, Coneheads was before, wasn't it? Or was it after? Coneheads and
Blues I think it was Coneheads was first. But I think Coneheads and Wayne's World were like the most successful SNL movies, and then they kept trying to make SNL movies, and nothing really hit outside of those.
Blues Brothers.
That's true.
Was that a sketch, or was that?
It started out as a sketch with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. Then it slowly became like a real like musical group.
That's definitely the most impactful movie then. Like Wayne's World is great, but I think Blues Brothers is the classic of all the SNL movies then.
Yeah, it's my personal favorite.
Yeah. Phil Hartman was one of my all-time favorite cast members. He could play the straight character and still be funny, but then he had like the goofball characters too, like the caveman lawyer. He could just play both parts so well. And I was a big Phil Hartman fan going into, even after SNL and the show News Radio. It's one of my favorite. Just a hilarious guy.
But he had that commanding voice too. He could say the dumbest stuff in like the most like, I am Phil Hartman kind of voice.
Yep.
He had also he took the same character roles that like Charles Grodin was getting, like the sarcastic but not like crazy expressive sort of guy. His vocal tone and a little bit of his facial expressions went a long way to communicate. And he usually played the guy that's like, you kind of want to punch this guy.
Yep.
Yeah. And you talk about movie careers. It's you would think like Mike Myers has like a great movie career, but outside of Austin Powers and Shrek, there's really not a whole lot. He's got two good franchises that he got multiple movies out of, but those are really his two big names to fame.
He really relied on him being able to do like different voices and like different, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like affectations and accents.
Yes, exactly. And it got old after a while, right? So you got the whole Austin Powers thing, and then he tries to do Love Guru and whatever other ones that he does, and it's all like a different take on the same character, which people kind of just found out.
Yeah, Love Guru really sunk his career. I even liked how what is it? So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Oh yeah, I actually never saw that movie, but I do know it.
That's a good one. Like there's a scene where he has the same Scottish thing where it's like one of these characters is a Scottish, and so he's got like there's this kid sitting watching the TV in front of him. He's like, "Head, move! I swear there's like an orange on the toothpick." He's mocking the size of this kid's head. And so, like, we talked about Shrek, and just real quick, because we're in this era where Chris Farley was there, and you're right, he died in '97, unfortunately, and really sucks because Chris Farley was such a great physical comedy. Like, we had John Belushi giving great physical comedy, and then no one did it like him until Chris Farley came along, and just the physical comedy Chris Farley brought was just absolutely fantastic. And yeah, he was supposed to be Shrek, as I think a lot of us know. And then because he died, they had some of the lines recorded of him as Shrek, so they had to put the movie on hold. And then they brought in Mike Myers, and they had him re-record. And so he recorded all the lines. He's like, this just doesn't work for me. Can I do it again? And he re-recorded the lines for the third time, and this time he had the Scottish accent, and that's what stuck. So he did the whole movie without an accent, and then just wiped it all and did it again with the Scottish.
I mean, if you think about it, like Chris Farley would have been Shrek. He had, Tommy Boy, Black Sheep. I guarantee he would have been in. I think he would have had a really good movie career if he had lived.
Yeah, and David Spade suffered then because David Spade was a good compliment to Chris Farley, who was the tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic, quipping humor. But you need someone like Chris Farley to take those punches really well. And David Spade didn't really have people to do that outside of Chris Farley. And so outside of that, like, he peaked then with Emperor's New Groove, which was a great role for him. And then he didn't really have anything that was that great after.
Well, there's a lot of Dirt. Yeah, there's a lot of guilty pleasure. There's Joe Dirt. Remember, what's that movie where he was? What's that movie, like something Dickie Child Star?
Oh my gosh, Dickie Roberts.
Dickie Roberts Child Star.
I'm not saying he didn't have movies. I'm just saying he didn't have good ones.
I've actually never seen both of those movies, but I know Joe Dirt is like a cult classic. People love that movie.
Yeah, well, at the end of that movie, it was just funny. They have like a bunch of actual child stars. Like they had like Screech from Saved by the Bell, and I think Jaleel White was there talking about like basically singing a song about how crappy it is to be a child star.
Yeah.
With an F-bomb dropped by Marsha Brady.
That's true. Yeah. See, that is a great movie. I don't care.
Is it? Speaking of people who make movies, but they're not necessarily great, we also had Adam Sandler in this era.
Yeah. Which Adam Sandler, I mean, his name is a genre of movie in itself.
Man, definitely. He made a meal. We talked about Mike Myers, like doing his accents and stuff like that, and it's the same character just across. Adam Sandler's created a freaking identity around just like talking like a man child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which sometimes it almost ruins the movie. Like it could, like, what's the movie?
Jack and Jill.
Never saw that one.
Neither did I.
That one's one of the worst ones.
Little Nicky was actually like a pretty good movie, but he's just so annoying in it. Like it gets really old after a while. But I like Adam Sandler, but he definitely had a time where his movies were great, and then after that, not so great. Still some
good ones in the mix, but like his good ones, his best ones are behind him. I think the last one I loved was Mr. Deeds.
Mr. Deeds was really good. I will say. Hot take: if Chris Farley didn't die, Kevin James wouldn't have a career, because Adam Sandler is like moved from this sounds derivative, but he's moved from one fat guy physical comedy to another one, and Kevin James that like took the roles that I think Chris Farley would have gotten, because Chris and Adam had a longer relationship, an older one, and I think he would have stuck around with that.
Adam Sandler, in one of his like comedy specials, he sings a song about Chris Farley, and in one of the lyrics is like, if you were here, we'd be getting on a plane to shoot Grown Ups 3.
Yeah, right.
You know, we talk about and like I don't know how much we'll talk about, but there has always been behind the scenes stuff, a lot of controversy, a lot of fights, and a lot of disagreements on the Saturday Night Live set. There's been plenty of that. I think Chris Farley was a void of all that, and I think he was an emotional glue for that group. That it seems like every single person who talks about him, and maybe because it's because he's dead. You don't speak ill of the dead. But everyone who I hear talk about him, they just have such fond memories of how he would just make them laugh on days that they weren't feeling it. And he was like that guy that was making everyone around him happy. And you love hearing that about a person.
I think you're right. I think he brought everybody together for a couple different reasons. One, because he made everybody laugh. But two, I think the whole cast knew the other side of Chris Farley and what he was dealing with. And they would all come together to try to help him through a lot of that stuff and get him, sober and safe and all that stuff. But there was a documentary called The Dark Side of Comedy, and the first episode was about Chris Farley, and it was all about the other side of comedy and how it takes a toll on him. But it was a really good watch.
Yeah, but backing up, we're talking about controversy. There's two different controversies that I heard about. One was, when Chevy Chase left the show, he came back and like he was essentially, his spot was filled by Bill Murray. Mm-hmm. And when he came back to host, I guess he got in a fight with Bill Murray backstage that actually turned into him going into a fist fight. Basically him saying like, I'm better than you and all of that.
Like two of the hardest people to work with, Bill Murray and Chevy Chase.
Yeah. The other one, I'm excited because I bet this will be in the movie, because I saw looking at the cast and it actually has J.K. Simmons playing Milton Berle. And I guess I think it was like the second or third season. It was early on. And talking about how like a nightmare he was to work with, because he was a very well-known guy, and he basically was like, I can do whatever I want. So that he kept like mugging to the camera, ruining sketches, ad-libbing like inappropriate jokes. He said that he like planted people in the audience to give himself a standing ovation, and then was just rude to everybody behind the scenes. And then he was basically banned from set.
J.K. Simmons will nail that role.
So I mean, if they have him listed in the cast, they have to at least touch on that. Otherwise, there's no point in casting
Probably,
him.
Yeah. I mean, it is that movie is going to focus. It sounds like it's supposed to be like real time. Like it's the 90 minutes before they go on, and it's supposed to everything happen in real time, which is a great movie concept too. I love real time, whatever. So I don't know how much they can get into it, but I'm sure they're going to get into that aspect of his personality.
Yeah. Right. And one thing is interesting though is, it's almost not worth mentioning, but like, so Alex, did you know that Jim Henson and like not the Muppets, but like there was like Saturday Night Live Muppets in the first season?
I saw that Jim Henson was one of the characters in the movie, but I had no idea as to what context.
Yeah. It was this like group of like puppet characters. It was like called the Land of Gorch. It was like these like weird like sketchy looking alien kind of monsters, and it was the same performers. It was Jim Henson, Frank Oz, and all them, but they were doing this like sketches. They weren't really funny. And they weren't allowed to have the Muppet writers do anything. They had to have like the Saturday Night Live people, and they didn't gel with the cast. It was just kind of off-putting. I guess John Belushi called them the mucking Fuppets. And then, but the thing is that was 75 to 76. They basically parted ways, saying, okay, this isn't working. We're going to cut you from the show. The very next year, they went, okay, we're going to start the Muppet Show. And then they had great success over there. Right. So it's just an example of like good talent in the wrong show.
The wrong setting.
Yeah. So we'll jump back into 95 because that was kind of the year that it transferred over another new. So like there was a couple different great generations of comedy. And so like for me, I think SNL is like at its best in 86 to 95, the era we just talked about. Yeah. But 96 to 2005 isn't so bad either, because that time frame we started getting characters like, or actors like Will Ferrell when they kind of launched, because 96 really, like there's a lot of turnover from 95 to 96, and Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry were two of the big names. Tim Meadows like stuck behind because he was in there a little bit earlier, but he kind of got into bigger roles after they left. Molly Shannon was another one. And then as it got later in the 90s, early 2000s, we also added some actresses like Maya Rudolph, Amy Poehler, and Tina Fey.
Jimmy Fallon.
Yep. Who I think is better at hosting than acting.
Yeah. It kind of brings up one reason why I think people like watching Saturday Night Live, because it's live. And you get to see kind of like the bloopers happening in real time, people breaking character, mistakes kind of happening. And Jimmy Fallon was like the king of that. He would always break character. Yeah. And I think for me, like I kind of enjoyed the skits when they would break characters. It almost made a skit that maybe wasn't that funny elevate to the next level where it was a lot more funny, or the ones that were really funny, even more hilarious. Like one that I always think of is, I don't know the name of the skit, but it's where Jimmy Fallon and Sean Hayes are working at like a store in a mall, and it's like a really ritzy, like super rich store, and they're basically just rude to every single customer that walks in. And the boss is Will Ferrell, and he's on a wheelchair, and he comes in there and he's like just looks super snotty and everything. And then the funniest bit of the whole thing is when he receives a phone call, he pulls his phone out, and the phone is like the size of his pinky, and he pulls it out, and he's right here. And the entire skit, Sean Hayes and Jimmy Fallon can't even make eye contact with Will Ferrell. They can't keep their composure. They're just laughing the whole time. And that's the only reason why that skit is so funny, is because the entire skit is them breaking character.
And what if that was Will Ferrell knowing, like, what's on the page might not be funny, but I have to make a meal out of this and get it to be funny.
Yep.
Will Ferrell was one of the more frequent ones to make people break. Because like in the cowbell sketch, there was a little bit of breaking. Not as bad as like some of the ones you were talking about, but there was some breaking as it went along. And even Will Ferrell like chuckles for a second.
Yeah. Well, then, I mean, you can't talk about Will Ferrell and SNL without mentioning Jeopardy and all of those sketches. And I mean, that basically it's a vehicle for celebrity impressions, but just the animosity between him and Daryl Hammond as Sean Connery.
Yep.
Which was there any like basis in real life to Sean Connery making like off-color jokes, or is that they just make that up for SNL?
So. I think they just try to think of like an actor that wouldn't be like that, and then Daryl Hammond, you can do an impression of Sean Connery. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
I think Sean Connery and Norm Macdonald's Burt Reynolds, those are both fantastic. And then whoever the third one that they get for each one. Right. I can't remember which one it was, but one time they had like someone as Keanu Reeves, and he just kept buzzing in, I know Kung Fu. Yeah. You do not know Kung Fu.
The Tobey Maguire, maybe? Might have been Toby.
It could have been.
And they had Jimmy Fallon play Adam Sandler for one of them too, and he just is the whole time.
Actually, now you say it, I think it actually was Jimmy Fallon as Keanu Reeves. Jimmy Fallon also played a French Stewart in it once. He just like made his eyes like really slid in.
This is jumping ahead a little bit, but it's related. So there was one in more recent ones where Jimmy Fallon wasn't on the show, but it was Jimmy Fallon was like came on as a cameo, and they're doing Celebrity Family Feud, and we had Jimmy Fallon was pretending to be Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, but right across from him was Justin Timberlake as Jimmy Fallon. And it's one of those things where you're making fun of a celebrity in front of them,
right?
And Justin Timberlake's just like, all right, everybody, this is so great. This is awesome. This is great to be here. And just
wow.
completely hamming it up, right? And like Jimmy Fallon is losing it because he knows that he's completely just nailing it.
That's so good.
I mean, it's the same thing with speaking of Jimmy Fallon and looking like this other person is when they brought in Jerry Seinfeld and then had Jimmy Fallon do Jerry Seinfeld to Jerry Seinfeld on the SNL or on the Weekend Update.
Yeah.
But you were right. I did look it up. It is Tobey Maguire who was Keanu Reeves. Well played, Mr. Bilyeu. And then still with Will Ferrell, just because here's the thing. I think, some of those earlier guys like Aykroyd and Bill Murray, like they probably had the most prolific careers of anyone on SNL. Eddie Murphy's right there too. And then, Adam Sandler had a good career. Mike Myers had enough of a career. Some of these guys, but then Will Ferrell, I think, is like in second or third place as like the biggest career post SNL.
Well, I mean, just like Adam Sandler, like with Adam Sandler and Will Ferrell, you can argue about the quality of their movies, but you can't argue with their success because both of those guys are constantly making movies.
And Will Ferrell hits a lot more than he misses.
Yeah.
Yep. There's not many people that don't like Will Ferrell. They might not like some of his movies, but like he is hilarious just in general.
Yeah, and I mean it's the same. It's like the Jim Carrey syndrome, where it's like if you don't like that over the top crazy, you're probably not going to like Will Ferrell. But there's some movies where he's more subdued, like Stranger Than Fiction.
Yep, and like who doesn't like Elf?
Yeah,
I mean, I think everyone thinks that movie is funny.
Elf, Step Brothers, another underrated one. I thought I liked the Daddy's Home movies with him and Mark Wahlberg.
Yep. And then the other guys too with Mark Wahlberg.
Oh yeah.
I think is my unpopular opinion, but I think my absolute favorite Will Ferrell is Talladega Nights. To me, that's top tier, better than anything else he's done.
Another pairing with John C. Reilly.
Yep. All right, so real quick, we'll just hit on this last one. I know that there's a current cast, and I remembered what I would have done for my trivia. But we can still do yours because of the current cast. Who is the longest tenured actor from the current cast?
Thompson.
I know that one. Yeah,
Kenan Thompson.
You guys are so smart. Look at you.
And not only interesting thing with Kenan Thompson is that he got his start on All That, which was literally created to be all SNL for kids.
He's literally always been in sketch comedy like his whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, he did Kenan and Kel, and that was scripted, but still, it's.
But even then. Kenan and Kel always started with Kenan and Kel coming out in front of the live studio audience talking about like, hey, we got a great show. Like it had that feel for it.
Yeah, it did.
There was still, even after the ensemble right after, the Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry, there was still, the next group was still super solid too. I mean, Bill Hader, he's so funny. Kristen Wiig, obviously.
Yeah.
And
Andy
Samberg, Chris Parnell,
Jason Sudeikis,
Sudeikis, and what is his name? Fred Armisen. I think he's so underrated. He is hilarious, and he went on to do Portlandia after that as well too, which is another pretty funny sketch comedy show. But those years too, where I think were very funny as well.
They went straight to jail.
Yeah.
I love this story. I use this story as like kind of a like an object lesson almost for like when I speak sometimes. But Andy Samberg and Bill Hader, their auditions were very different. And they get in the elevator at the same time going up to their auditions. They look at each other, and Andy Samberg has like this box of like props and puppets, and he's got like all this stuff with him. And Bill Hader starts freaking out. He's like, I don't have anything. I should have brought. Why did I bring anything? Why is it just me? What's wrong with me? And then later we find out Andy Samberg is like, that guy doesn't have any puppets. Why do I need all this stuff? Why can't I be funny? And it's such a great idea of like how self-conscious we get and like what we've got. Just use what we got,
Right.
Yeah. Well, so there's a video going that I went on a sketch of this cast, and Bill Hader was definitely the star of it. And it's basically just an excuse to have a bunch of celebrity impersonations. Mm-hmm. And it was like different celebrities auditioning for Jurassic Park. Have you seen this one?
Yeah. I don't know if I've seen the Jurassic Park one, but I've seen like the Star Wars one, and
And like because Bill Hader does a fantastic Alan Alda, and this is
yes.
Is Alan Alda as the guy who the raptor hunter guy? And okay, I'm gonna attempt to do it, but I'm knowing it's terrible. But Bill Hader does it great. He's like, "Oh, this is great." So I just do this, and then the raptor attacks me. Man, it's terrible because I'm not Bill Hader.
I've seen that one. Wow, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, and then who is it? I think Kate McKinnon is also from the recent cast. She's one of the best ones too. And I think she was in there doing these different celebrity impersonations.
Yep.
And there's that skit where the whole thing is just like Bill Hader is this like dancing like robot guy. Or have you seen that? It's a weird sketch. Like Taran Killam and whoever the woman is, they buy their there's like the product where it's like meant to be like Doug, or they give him a name, and it's just Bill Hader in a glass case, and they say like you turn it on, and all it does is just him just like awkwardly, weirdly dancing, and the sketch goes on for a little bit too long, but it's the kind of sketch that on paper is not funny, but Bill Hader makes it funny.
Make it funny.
Yeah, and so speaking of impersonations too. One thing that SNL is just known for is their political satire, and so they've had so many. They've had so many of these characters act like do these impersonations. Like the most recent one of seeing Alec Baldwin as Trump and Jim Carrey as Biden. Back, I don't know who they've got as Kamala right now, and I don't know this year what they're. I think also Alec Baldwin isn't doing Trump anymore. Is that right?
I don't know. Probably trouble.
Is the show still on? Are they even able to turn around and get a Kamala this soon? I'm sure they will if they don't already.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Back to it.
But like we go way back to early seasons. Like how much do you guys know about President Gerald Ford? Because for me, I know, he's a one-term president. He pardoned Nixon and that he was clumsy. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, he was an athlete when he was a young man, and he was, I don't want to say he's graceful, but like he was probably just like you and me, where he could put one foot in front of the other without falling over.
Yeah.
And then he takes a tumble down the stairs of Air Force One once, and then there was just another unrelated incident where he accidentally walks into a door frame. So like had a handful of incidents of clumsiness, but Chevy Chase portrays him as like a bumbling oaf who can't do anything right, and it seems like political scientists are saying that like things like this and some of the stories about Ford had created this perception that he was this wildly clumsy guy. And really, it didn't seem like he actually was all that bad. He just had some very public moments.
Right. Falling down some stairs every once in a while, right?
I know. I mean, not me. Never. No.
Definitely never did that.
There was a Funny or Die sketch. I think it was when Obama was being elected, because it was Fred Armisen as Obama, and all of a sudden he's being visited. They bring them all back. Like in this one sketch, it was Fred Armisen as Obama, Will Ferrell as W. Bush, Dana Carvey as George Sr., Daryl Hammond as Clinton. I think they even had Jim Carrey as Reagan, and they brought in Chevy Chase as Ford, all in the same sketch.
Yeah, they brought all the presidents. It was for some special. I don't even know if it was for SNL. It was some other special that they did it for. But yeah, I remember that. That was good.
Yeah.
And speaking of Ferrell as Bush, there's another one that people thought maybe SNL's acting swayed the election for Bush versus Gore, because the way Daryl Hammond portrayed Al Gore, there was a stiffness to him, which is fine, and maybe there's that stiffness to Al Gore in real life, but because Will Ferrell is as eclectic and as charismatic as he is, he brought this looseness to George W. Bush that relaxed people. And a lot of people think that voters were swayed by that, and they ended up voting Bush, even if they weren't agreeing with his total politics, because of the way that Will Ferrell portrayed him.
That presidential debate skit is just classic. The strategery.
Yeah.
Sum up your debate in one word. It makes up strategery. And then Gore is lockbox.
Lockbox. That's the term. See, I love Norm Macdonald's Bob Dole though. Bob Dole.
Yeah. Only thing is, like, it's 30 years later, and who knows who Bob Dole is anymore?
Yeah,
I do. He's my
Is that
man.
because of Norm Macdonald?
I am. Yep, we're buddies.
Phil Hartman did a really good Bill Clinton too. Do you remember the one where he is like on a jog and the security team is behind him and he wants to take a quick break and he goes into a McDonald's and he's going around talking to all the different people and he's eating all the food like off of their table and he's supposed to be on a diet.
I don't think I've seen that one. No.
I don't remember that one, but I love it.
He's trying to explain politics while like stealing everybody's food. See, this is like taxes. Taxes. He takes the burger, takes a big old bite of it, puts it back over there.
That skit was written by a dad.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
also I mean, that's literally an episode of Parks and Rec where Ron Swanson does that to that girl who comes in.
Oh yeah.
Remember that? And also, if Kamala wins, I guarantee there's going to be sketches making fun of Tim Walz.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I think of the modern era, probably the best impersonation I would say is Tina Fey as Sarah Palin.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that Sarah Palin actually came on to SNL because she's like, I've got to show I'm approachable. Like that influenced that election too. It raised Palin's popularity, not necessarily good popularity. It just raised the awareness of her. And so she was a lot more in the zeitgeist. And so she had to be like, I need to take back control of this narrative. And she came on the show. She wasn't the first, I think Hillary Clinton came on the show too after being
she did, yeah. But Tina Fey and Sarah Palin was so good that there are a couple times you have to really take a look like, okay, which one is it really?
She looked more like Sarah Palin than Sarah Palin did.
Yes.
So it's nuts to think like how those portrayals actually influence our politics. Do we have Bush as a president now because of SNL? Is that the reason? Because like we know it came down to Florida. We know it was contested, but like how much of it was because of that? It's
people that don't pay attention to politics, but they watch SNL. Like, oh, I like him better.
Yeah.
And to a lesser degree, Weekend Update does this. Now I know Weekend Update, like they hit on the big news stuff, but they also do a lot of like smaller news things. And so like it's nowhere near the level that like Daily Show does. And we'll talk about the Daily Show in actually a couple episodes. We're going to do another one of these about Daily Show and how influential that was. But like there was still that idea of like, let's introduce the concept of here's a headline, let's mock it. And let's introduce this joke with it. And it's created the culture that we have too. It launched Daily Show, which like took it to the next level where now the way we consume news and media is we need to be entertained by news. And I don't think that's a good thing specifically, but it is definitely where we are as a culture for sure.
I remember I used to love watching the Colbert Report too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, wasn't Stephen Colbert on the Daily Show? That's where he got.
Yeah, and then he got his own show, and then now he took over for David Letterman, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and you talked about talking about the stuff that it's influenced after that. Do you have more, or do you want? Or I mean, we can talk about that too. The shows that SNL has influenced.
Yeah, let's do that.
I mean, the first big one is Mad TV.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that still on, or did that run?
No, it's done. Yeah,
I think it's been done for a while.
Well, it was 90s into early 2000s.
It was on longer than we think it was, but I don't think it was really as known or as good anymore. But
no, I really liked it though, and it's interesting because like it's kind of the show you might think like, why do we need both? And I can't really. Maybe you guys can put your finger on what made it different, but it had a different vibe to it than it did.
Almost like a more. It was almost closer to like National Lampoons. It was more like immature kind of humor.
Yeah.
It was on from 95 to 2009. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to like crap on it, but it felt more like it was more preteen versus jokes for like adults, college age. Because like SNL definitely targeted the 18 to 35 demographic, 100%. But Mad TV was okay to swing a little bit lower. I felt like
the cool show that the teens wanted to watch. I think it was like a more like rebellious and like raunchy, because raunchies you can kind of get on TV, but it definitely had its fair share of memorable skits.
Yeah, I mean Stewart's
a huge one. Yeah. What I can do.
Yeah, and Miss Swan.
Yes, the coffin lady. There are some good ones.
It's funny because I think of when I think of like that type of like okay, it's a little more cooler, it's a little more hip. I actually think more of In Living Color. That In Living Color was.
I think that was
was a bit more that way. And Jim Carrey's big role.
Jim Carrey, Brothers.
Yeah. So that one skit I remember on Mad TV. So Alex, me and Matt have also done some episodes on your favorite show, Survivor.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
Yeah. And there was a season of Survivor where they literally started. And this isn't Mad TV. This was on Survivor. They started them out based on race. There was a white tribe, a black tribe, an Asian tribe, and a Hispanic tribe. And so Mad TV took that and ran with it. And this whole thing where it was like it's a swimming challenge. And the black people get a bucket of water, and the white people, you get to have a boat and a yacht, and like it basically just like making fun of it. But then they say the prize if you win is a bucket of chicken. And all of a sudden it turns to the black people like, well, we got it. And it's just like that kind of like jokes where it's like even I don't know like
sounds like a Chappelle show.
Do that. Yeah. Which that too, like those shows on Comedy Central, Chappelle Show, and then later Key and Peele.
Yeah.
There's also with both In Living Color and Mad TV, I think they had more diverse writers and diverse cast because they would go more into that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas, SNL did make race jokes, but it tended to be more like it felt like it was white person written. And was given just to because like Eddie Murphy, I believe, complained about that he's like I'm getting I'm just the token black guy, and he wasn't the only one. Chris Rock left early on this show because he felt he was in that same role. And I think there was someone else but there was a lot of that. It sounded like it came up that it was like okay, you're not. It's not so inclusive. It's just more like we're going to do a black joke here. And because we've got one black guy, he's the one who's going to do it.
Yeah. Well, Tim Meadows and Kenan Thompson didn't feel that way because they're like the two longest running cast members.
Yeah. And I think it got better after 2000. Like, I think after Chris Rock left, maybe 5-6 years later, they got more diverse in their writing.
Right.
This is me spitballing. I don't know for sure. I have nothing to back this up.
I've done all the research.
There's a skit on a recent one I saw, and it, I don't remember who it was. There's a comedian, I think it's Nate Bargatze. I could be wrong who it is. He was the host, and it was like set in like the old timey like 1800s, and he's telling everybody about the future, and it's like all the stuff that doesn't make sense. Like, football. It's an American game where you throw a ball with your hands. Yeah, like, there's no kicking in football. It's like there's a little kicking. And it's how you can say stuff. And throughout his monologue, Keenan's like saying like, what about men of color such as I? And he just completely ignores him.
Right. I need to watch that episode because I heard that one was actually really funny, and I love Nate Bargatze. And I think that skit is actually based on one of his bits that he does in his stand-up. He has a stand-up bit where we're talking about if I were from the future, like back in time, I would be screwed because there'd be no way I'd be able to explain anything. No one would believe me. I'd be the crazy guy because you think I'd make money because I know the future. Well, we have these things called phones. You just like pick it up and you talk to someone. I don't know how it works. So you can't like prove anything.
Oh yeah, I heard that. It's like satellite. What's a satellite? Oh, metals in the sky.
Can't explain anything. Oh yeah.
A couple other things I wanted to bring up for influence too is like, we obviously there's the political influence. Obviously there's what the TV shows that it influenced as well. And like most sketch comedy now can thank SNL. Sure, there's sketch comedy before. We talked about Laughing.
And the Carol Burnett show.
Carol Burnett, yeah.
Yeah. But like Monty Python was a pioneer. That was like the 60s. Yep. That was 10 years before this. But I just feel like SNL guys, we're almost at 50 years. Mm-hmm. It's been 49 years and it's still on the air. Like, obviously it's going to influence culture and even the way we talked. Like back in the 90s, Wayne's World started this thing where it's like you'd say something and then you'd not, and you'd have that word at the end of it. Like Borat mocked it, but it
started with that was a Wayne's World original.
That's a Wayne's World original. I mean, the Jane, you ignorant slut. That's not so like widespread as not was.
Right.
The term Debbie Downer, it didn't originate with SNL, but they did a Debbie Downer series of sketches, and it brought that term more into the forefront. But like
you can't say the word cowbell without thinking about the cowbell sketch.
Right.
Literally, my next example that I had right here, more cowbell. Or I don't know if you guys remember Sweaty Balls.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the girly man from Hans and Franz pumping you up.
Yeah.
And we talked about the church lady that isn't that special.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I heard that when I was like a kid.
Yep, definitely. Yep, and I think like all the earlier years too, you know, what makes it so nostalgic and just like funny is like this is before there was like internet, before YouTube, so you really had to watch it live to really enjoy it. And then I remember as a kid, my parents would always buy like the best of Chris Farley, the best of Adam Sandler. So you watch just an hour and a half of like the best skits, and it was just so hilarious. And then I remember like watching some of like the actual like just seasons of like, oh, the whole show is not really that funny. There's like usually one or two that are really funny. I was just so used to watching an hour and a half of just straight hilarious skits. But it just, it made it. It was a thing that we used to do, you know, as a kid. We would just, you know, as a family, we would watch Saturday Night Live together. My parents would laugh. We would laugh. It just made it like a nice family show you could watch that everyone really appreciated.
Yeah. And we haven't even touched on the musical guests, which,
I
mean, that one, I mean, aside from a few specific moments, that's not the memorable part of the show. It's basically just like, oh, I'm going to watch one of my favorite bands for a little while.
Right. And that's another point to the same thing too, is like in order to see these bands play live, you had to go to concert. You know, we didn't have YouTube to pull up any of their live performance or anything. So like there was a really good chance to watch them play two of their songs. And that's a good point.
And in the early on, like the first or second year, Lorne Michaels basically put out a plea offering to pay the Beatles $3,000 to reunite and come on the show, and they never did.
Oh, really?
I think some of them did individually. I'm pretty sure Paul McCartney has hosted.
He was definitely on there because they had the Chris Farley show. Do you remember that one where
Chris
Farley was interviewing Paul McCartney and Chris Farley's just playing like a super shy, like timid guy. And
you remember when you said
one time
all you need?
Like died but you like weren't dead? Was that real? Or was that like a hoax?
Or the remember when this would happen? That was awesome.
Yeah. You remember that? It was awesome.
But when Adele was on in 2008, that was after her first album dropped, and her popularity shot up right after her SNL. And obviously she's very talented, and so it deserved it. But like SNL really helped put her in the forefront of people in their recollection.
Right.
And same with Prince back in 1981. He had been around for a couple years. I think he had 2 CDs, but like SNL, his performance on SNL was one that like really made people take notice of him. And then a few years later, when he came out with Purple Rain, that's when everyone was just like blew up like, okay, Prince is the king.
Yeah.
And then on the opposite side, it killed some music careers, like Ashley Simpson.
Yep.
She gets caught lip dubbing or lip syncing, then her career falls apart. Now, it was only a matter of time before it was going to fall apart anyway, based on her talent. But like that accelerated it, and people are like, all right, we're done with Ashley Simpson's experiment.
Yep.
Okay, side note, speaking of Ashley Simpson, I've been watching, I don't know why, I've been watching Seventh Heaven. Just because, like, and I'm at this point in the show where, like, some of the main, like Jessica Biel and some of them have left the show, so they bring in all the new characters. And Ashley Simpson is on the show, and at this point, I don't know why she's still on the show. She was brought in as one of the son's girlfriend, and then he leaves for college, and she's still hanging out with the family. Like, why are you here?
I just want to be a part of something.
Yeah.
That's another. There's also people who were never part of the cast, but were such like prolific hosts. I mean, I'm thinking of Steve Martin and Tom Hanks. Neither one were. Were both like Alec Baldwin. Some of like the best ones. Like you just think of Steve Martin right along with some of those names, but he was never actually in the cast.
Yep. Definitely.
I don't know how many times Jim Carrey hosted. I know he for sure did once when I was like, I remember watching the Jim Carrey episode live, and it's like, Jim Carrey, I love this guy. And like that was him in the Night at the Roxbury sketch, just a perfect fit.
Yes.
Well, in the early days, I don't really know who he is outside of this, but his name was Buck Henry. He was the season, like the first 5 seasons, he did the season finale every time. He was like their ringer. and he was the first one to induct the 5-timers club. Which I always thought that was Steve Martin.
So that was $5.
Does Alec Baldwin does he hold the record for the most?
Let me look it up. I know John Goodman's done a bunch too.
He's up there for sure. Gosh, just think that Jim Carrey episode. Do you remember
Alec Baldwin has hosted 17 times.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Wow. Where do I sign that? There was a list somewhere that oh, there we go. Yep, he is. Yep, and then right after him is Steve Martin with 16. Then John Goodman with 13.
And Tom Hanks with 10.
Yep, Tom Hanks and Buck Henry both with 10, and then those are the only 5 who have hit double digits. But like in the early days, another repeat guest often was Elliot Gould.
Oh, okay. I thought he was on the show for like a minute.
No, I don't think he was ever in the cast.
It's surprising to see that Chevy Chase has hosted it 8 times when he clearly didn't get along with Lauren.
Right.
I think he now has a lifetime ban.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Well, he came back for the 40th. I know he was one scene. Was that kind of thing where they let him come back just for that occasion, and then now he can't? Or
I don't know.
I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong.
You didn't do the research on that one, Matt?
Uh,
No, he is. Chevy Chase was banned. Let me click on it here.
It says he was banned in 1997.
Yeah, I mean he did pop back up, but he slapped Sherry O'Terry in the back of the head and pretty hard, and Will Ferrell was the one who stood up for her, and I think Will Ferrell had enough clout to be like, no, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I heard that I think it was in the 80s or 90s when Chevy Chase came back to host. Whoever they had their first openly gay cast member, and Chevy Chase said, "Hey, how about we do a skit where you're dying of AIDS and we weigh you to see how close you are to death every week?"
Oh my gosh! Jeez. Oh,
yeah, Terry Sweeney. But Milton Berle is also banned.
Well, he's also dead, so it doesn't matter anymore. But
Kanye West is banned. Martin Lawrence. Not to be confused with Martin Luther, the founder of Lutheran religion.
Martin Lawrence surprises me. What did he? Is he behind the scenes?
I'll tell you in a second because I need to look into it. Adrian Brody, Andy Kaufman, Rage Against the Machine, and Steven Seagal.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, I think
some of those are surprising.
Told not to use the F word in their song, and they did.
Okay. Well, a couple of those people are dead.
Do you guys hear that upstairs?
That's at your house?
Yeah, my wife is aggressively doing the dishes.
She's really mad.
Told you she's not the nice one.
So apparently his monologue included comments about female genitals, and I don't understand why that was so bad.
Yeah.
But then he also did a lot of improvisation in his in the sketches, which Lauren isn't a fan of. But I don't know, it's very vague, but at the same time, it's not only is he banned, the mention of the name Martin Lawrence is banned on Saturday Night Live set. You can't even bring up his name.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Must be more to it than just that. Then I would think.
And when you said Kanye, I mean that doesn't surprise me with Kanye. That just makes me think of that celebrity reach out, whatever it was after 9/11 when he was with Mike Myers. And just says George Bush doesn't care about black people, and just the panic on Mike Myers' face. What am I supposed to do?
Chris Tucker right next to him looked at him like, what?
No, it was Mike Myers.
Yeah, he was over to Chris Tucker, and he was like,
Yeah. With that kind of show, with that kind of humor, you have to be. I feel like you have to really try to be banned from that show.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, like Rage Against the Machine raged so hard, the machine has said no way.
Yep. I think the line in the song is "F you, I won't do what you tell me." So
we shouldn't be surprised,
right?
Well, I was also looking at in the early days. There was a running sketch where John Belushi would play. I forget what his name was. Like the president of NBC. And he would be making fun of him, and they knew that he didn't like that, but they was like, "Screw it, we're gonna do it anyways."
There was a lot of tongue in cheek of like, we are gonna bite the hand that feeds us, and we're just gonna see what happens.
Right?
And, like, props to you for being crazy and ballsy like that, but I don't know if that's props or stupidity.
Right. Well, it's more impressive then, because in those early days, it wasn't like Saturday Night Live wasn't like the powerhouse it is now. Like, it could have easily been like, all right, screw you, we're going to cancel you.
Cutting it. Yep. Man, I would love just to see just behind the scenes of like a full week, on for Saturday Night Live. You know how they do like Hard Knocks for NFL? Yeah. I would love to see like a Hard Knocks of SNL, like just the behind the scenes in the writing room and all that stuff, the screen or the readings and everything.
I'm sure there's some of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I think my final thoughts here is that, like, talking about the influence, this show has really also changed our comedy, because like we've always had some over the line jokes, we've always had some irreverent humor, but SNL being as popular as it was and being as in the forefront as it was has helped a generation to really learn how to just take nothing seriously. Like that. Yeah. That sounds dramatic, but I do mean it in a way of like anything is game to make fun of. Yeah. And SNL did that. They like, sometimes that's not a good thing. I'll admit it. But sometimes there are things that we just need to laugh at. We need to mock.
Well, and so it goes twofold, right? So they bring it up to laugh at it, but it also drives awareness for it as well too, rather than just like being blunt and bringing something up about racial issues or whatever it might be. They bring it up in comedy, but it still can draw awareness to, that actually is a problem.
Yeah. If this wasn't a problem, then we wouldn't be joking about it, because it wouldn't be funny.
Right.
And we can have debate. I'm sure this is a really nuanced matter that I think us three are smart, but probably not smart enough to really get to the depths of it all to say how much of this is good, how much of this it is too far. And
74%.
Brian was ready. But regardless of how good or how bad it is, it did change the game. We have comedy the way it is now. The family comedies have slowly trickled away and been replaced with the Friends comedies, and then that's trickled away and been replaced with the Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Arrested Development, and like all of these are horrible people making horrible decisions. And I think a big part of that is owed to SNL. They gave us irreverent humor to chew on for the masses.
Right.
It also gave a platform. Like, so many of the stars we have, like Saturday Night Live was like their open mic night. Like, hey, or here's this person, and then we're churning out star after star after star for 5 decades.
Yeah, they can see that being their path to success, right? So like, okay, if I could just get on to SNL, I'll get, I'll be able to be known, and then I can go on to the next part of my career. And so it influenced a lot of stand-up comedians, and people wanting to get into that line of work.
I mean, you think about like, Andy Samberg went on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and like, Jason Sudeikis did Ted Lasso. Like, we might not have some of these shows if it weren't for them getting their start on SNL.
Yeah, and Andy Samberg really influenced YouTube, right, with his digital shorts. Like, digital shorts wasn't really a thing until he kind of brought the digital format of that. Because before that, they had, I can't remember what it was called, but it was around when like Mike Myers and Phil Hartman were on there. But they had it was like cartoons that that they would do, and they would draw cartoons.
Like the Something T Funhouse.
The ambiguously gay duo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which, speaking of which, Steve Colbert, he was one of those voices.
Oh, was he really?
Yep.
Didn't know that.
I can't remember who the other one was.
Conan O'Brien was a writer on SNL too. That's where he got started from.
I think Larry David was too, and Greg Daniels was too.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's saying, I think it was Colbert and Steve Carell were the ambiguously gay duo.
No way.
Really?
That's crazy. I'm gonna have to pull those up and rewatch them.
Oh my gosh. Well, there you go. That's a good enough note to leave it on.
That's influence right there into comedy.
All right.
I was gonna say, like, I don't have the list in front of me, but you've probably seen the list of here's all the actors who auditioned for SNL and didn't get it, and it's nuts. Like these guys are talented.
Jim Carrey,
they're not good enough to get on there.
Mm-hmm.
No way. All right. Well, that is it. That's SNL. I'm sure there's a lot more influence. I mean, it's 49 years. We couldn't possibly touch everything. So we gave as much as we could for a little over an hour.
Yeah.
But
we didn't even mention Rob Schneider. I mean,
he was part of the Adam Sandler crew.
Yeah.
He was better on SNL than anything else that he was in.
Agreed.
All right. Well, let's jump into trivia for last week. Last week, we talked about season premieres of TV shows. Woohoo, what's the best season premiere? And one of them that we talked about was Gay Witch Hunt from The Office, and a hilarious episode that caused Oscar Nunez to take a break from the show The Office. Why did Oscar's character, and real actor is named Oscar, why did he leave the show? The answer was because he had another show he was working on called Halfway Home. It didn't catch on. He came back, but he was allowed to take a break to see and pursue if that show was going to be what he wanted to do. So that's why they needed a reason for Oscar Nunez to go somewhere. It was for Halfway House. He went to a halfway home.
Huh. So this week, obviously after 50 years, we've had so many hosts of I almost said Survivor, hosts of Saturday Night Live.
What has more seasons, Survivor or SNL?
Actually, they're pretty close to the same because Survivor does 2 a year.
Crazy.
That's cheating. Survivor.
It is cheating. What a crappy show.
Who was the first professional athlete to be host of Saturday Night Live?
George Carlin.
He was the first host.
He was. Candace Bergen.
No.
She was the first female host.
Yeah.
Well, that is it. Okay, just real quick, peek behind the curtain. I was so excited for this episode. I really enjoy this kind of level of discussion about shows, to really research. I'm a research nerd. I love the chance to just look into stuff and talk about it. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to do it. I hope that you will stick around for other episodes like this. Like I said, in 2 episodes from now, we're going to do the same thing. Most influential TV show, The Daily Show, and how has that influenced our modern culture? We have a lot of other ones we're going to talk about too, and maybe we'll spread them out a little bit more than we're doing this time. But until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm Alex.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.